Okay, you're ready to do some more moving better and feeling better? We've got a great session coming up here in this embodied anatomy track. And I think that you're going to really enjoy how it goes for us. I'm glad to have you back. Of course, this is Cynthia Allen. And I would love to introduce you to Lisa Clark. She's the founder and executive director of Embodied Yoga. And she brings 40 years of study and personal practice and teaching to the process of everything she explores. She has her 500 hours with the Yoga Alliance, is certified with them, and she's also a registered international somatic movement educator. And she is a certified teacher practitioner in body mind centering. And for me, what really made me want to invite Lisa was the body mind centering piece, because I think it's something that could be much better known, and certainly much better known within this idea of embodied anatomy. And she's continued teaching over the last 40, 35 years, has traveled all over. She is part of Body Brain Bridge Cohen's BMC programs in terms of teaching anatomy and many other things for them. She lives in Chapel Hill, North Carolina. Hi, Lisa.
Hi. Hi.
Good to have you.
Thank you for inviting me.
You're welcome. You're welcome. So, I mean, you've already been doing this work most of your adult life. Is that right?
That's correct. Yeah.
Yeah. How did you start with yoga and then go from somewhere else, or what was your entry point?
My entry point was I was a visual artist and had just finished my undergraduate degree here at UNC in North Carolina and was looking to go more towards performance work. And I found a workshop of body mind centering locally with a teacher here. And when I read that workshop description, I thought, this is exactly what I've been looking for. You know, the time period was the early 80s and performance work hadn't started yet, really. We were still really limited to being in the studio if you were a painting or a visual artist, or you were a dancer. There was a big difference. And I was interested in blending the two of them. And that's what really brought me to my first BMC workshop, and then eventually to meet Bonnie in 1985 in Amherst, Massachusetts.
It's wonderful. Thanks for giving us that little view that seems, for me, just a slightly unusual entry, although certainly I understand dance and performance often enters into the body work. And I think that was Bonnie's background was OT and
Dance.
OT and dance. Yeah.
Yeah.
So um, I so I think body mind centering, when I was thinking about this whole track of embodied anatomy, I've had a little bit of exposure to the work, not a lot for sure, but some. And I have to say, I think you guys are crazy wild into the details of anatomy and the felt sense of the body. I mean, I think of us as being into it in Feldenkrais. I think you guys are into it in, I mean, again, it's like, for me, it's like magnified like 50 times. So tell us a little bit about this whole body mind centering approach.
Yeah. See, it is, I'm thinking about what you said. Body mind centering looks at all the different body systems. And so the different body systems are muscles, ligaments, bones and skeleton, organs, fluids, which also we include connective tissue in all the fluids, endocrine system, nervous system. So I think I've named all of them. There's a lot of body systems. So right away, it's vast. And then we look at, as we individuate out, then we look at how they interconnect to create homeostasis. So this is a big, deep, long study. Then Bonnie became very interested in embryology. And this changed everything because we study the living body. We don't study cadavers. We are the material. And so once we started looking into embryology and adding it to our anatomy work, What happened is we had so many things that were reconfirmed for us. And then it kind of took us to some new frontiers also. So how the body begins to make the different structures and systems and how they correlate to each other. So it's the movement of the structures as they're being made that creates the system. So it went back even further once we found embryology. So it's always about movement for us.
Always about movement.
Mm-hmm.
So you're connecting this. It seems like to me, when what my exposure has been, which is not public classes, but her teaching workshops by a video. It seems like the understanding is sort of a combination of what is the academic understanding of anatomy, what is Bonnie's felt sense of anatomy, which may match up and may not match up sometimes in terms of the two. Mm-hmm. And then guiding the participants into a clear felt sense of their anatomy. And when I say anatomy, I'm going back to the embryology. It's like she takes us back. In the ones that I was in, she takes us back into really not where we are today, but we start back at the embryological pinpoint and kind of grow from there. Is that correct? And then grow there to sort of present time and then go into movement. Is that an appropriate description?
I would describe it a little bit differently.
Yeah.
We start with the origins of the structure. And we watch how embryologically structures might appear for a period of time, and then the body reabsorbs them, and it uses the material to recreate the next structure. So it's a lot like folding, unfolding, origami. Once there's a structure there, and then the whole system reboots itself and becomes much more sophisticated in the structure as we look at the time period from conception, few days, 1 week, 2 weeks, on and on and on and on until we start looking more like the body that we have now. So all that memory is in the tissue. So we clearly define the difference between embodiment, which is when the body informs us of how it wants to move, because the material is in the tissues, versus somatics, which is kind of, it's body-based, but there's still a lot of cognitive. You're pulling it up to cognitive, dropping it back down into the cellular or deeper into the tissues. And then we differentiate between experiential learning and then top-down learning, which is cognitive. So perhaps in Bonnie's videos, she might show an anatomy drawing. And because she wants people to have a visual, this is what it looks like, this is where we could locate it. But she'll quickly get it out of that realm and she'll take it to, this is where it's located. Touch this place of the body. And then can you send movement into it or breath into it? Or can you breathe from it or move from it? And then the last step is the embodied structure begins to really inform you how it's going to move.
I love that. You sort of said something like it earlier, and I love hearing that again, that the embodied structure informs you how it's going to move. That's yeah, it's just one of those things to sit with a little bit, right?
Having been a studio artist for so many years before and when I came to BMC, I always felt it was the most poetic, most incredibly creative work. So it was an easy jump for me because when we go into these places, they're so like moving poetry. They're beautiful, particularly when we feel the connection from our structures to the larger structures around us that surround us in this world. And it's one of the reasons why we started to study developmental movement, because we not only study the movements of humans, but we study the movements of all the animals on the planet. So we start to understand the interconnection of everything. And that so worked for me as a yoga practitioner. I thought, boy, this is an updated version of that deep connection that yoga teaches us, the macro and the microcosm within us. And BMC does that constantly, which I just love. Or I love to pull out as a teacher.
I'm sure it gives a completely enhanced or deepening a process to the yoga practice, and a very lovely one. So your title that you gave us for this talk was Growing Empathy and Choice Through a Felt Experience of the Body. Growing empathy and choice. I think that's an interesting beginning. So why don't you say a little bit more about that title for us?
Well, as we increase our proprioception and our interoception or our exteroception, it's growing, it's updating our body mapping currently, constantly. And it gives us an option to change the story. Because we're not working on a nervous system level in BMC, we're working on a cellular level with all these different body systems and structures. And so it's when we get to that cellular level is that we begin to have choice. Instead of the nervous system just repeating the story for us, we create the space or the pause for something new to come in and inform us. And then it's picked up by our body-mind matrix, and it becomes the option, possible option for the next time. And this is changing the neuroplasticity of the brain and how we understand our body-mind matrix. So it gives us choice, and it creates self-empathy. Because interoception, and I also believe proprioception does this too, it's going into this part of the brain which is allowing us to feel empathy and compassion. It actually grows. So the more I can feel myself, the more I have this sort of empowering. I can make choice about my decisions. I can go from unconscious to conscious. And that changes everything for all of us. So we repattern the body through movement and touch in BMC. And we have multiple options because we work with different body systems.
So in body-mind centering, like maybe like and different in the Feldenkrais work, you have both a sort of a led version, a group version, and then you have a version that is more touch-oriented?
Yes, we can, and sometimes we do both. Mm-hmm. We're working with our hands to inform. At the same time, we're creating movement with the hands, with the body. Mm-hmm. So we're trained to feel every body system through our hands, because every body system has a way that it expresses itself. Mm-hmm. And you can feel it through your hands. And you also can see it when somebody moves.
Okay, so you're training not only your own individual felt sense, or helping your clients to have your own individual felt sense of these different levels, but when you were training as a practitioner, you were learning to sense those levels within someone else, not just within yourself.
Correct. Mm-hmm. We do it constantly, like we're learning it. We are the vehicle that we do the material through. Then we have an experience like that, and then we partner or we work with other people, and then we're learning how to do that with somebody else. And then also how to analyze and see movement, how someone is expressing themselves. So I guess I just named 3 different skills.
Yeah, yeah. Mm-hmm. Is an underlying concept then in body mind centering is not so much that there's a right way to move, but that there's something maybe ideal for that particular person? Or how would you explain what it is you're trying to facilitate? Is it?
How about options? So often with my clients or my students, when I'm working with them, we might have a movement. Let's say it's a movement of the arm and the shoulder girdle, but the movement becomes limited for whatever reason. We could focus on the skeletal connections from the fingers into the shoulder girdle. We could approach it that way. But let's say it's not working. I might take a completely different approach and say the freedom in your shoulder has nothing to do with your skeleton. It's actually about the upper lobes of your lungs. So I would go into the lobes to create that kind of sliding, gliding, lobe against lobe, to create freedom in the shoulder joint. So I went into the contents to affect the container. That's an example. So in answer to your question, I gave that individual another experience of themselves and another option of how the container is informed by the contents and vice versa, and how a movement might feel completely different depending on where we put our focus and our attention.
Mm-hmm. So I feel like this would be a good place before we maybe go into some more questions for people to get an experience, a small experience of how you might lead us in connecting with ourselves on these different levels.
Sure, love it. So I'm going to ask you to sit comfortably, okay? And you might want to sit up on a blanket or a cushion if you have one. I'm sitting on a blanket right now. We'll start very, very simply. And just take a moment, take a breath in and breath back out. Okay, I'd like you to choose an arm, okay? Left arm or right arm. So what I'd love you to do is take that arm up from your side and just bend. Let your elbow bring you up, arm bring you up, and just let your arm bone go up. Fingers can reach up towards your ceiling. And then I'm going to ask you to just kind of take that arm bone and your torso over to a side. I'm doing a side bend. And then I'm going to inhale and take my arm back up. And then I'm going to take my arm and let my shoulder go down, drop my arm back. Okay? I'll take a breath in, breath out. I'll just feel that side, and let's stay on the same side, okay? Now I'm going to ask you to bring your hand up. Feel the movement go through your arm. Feel it go through your shoulder blade. Feel your ribs help take the arm up. And you're reaching for the ceiling. And then our ribs and the arm and the shoulder blade, we go sideways. We inhale back up. Let it be really easy. We exhale the arm back down. Let it drop by your side. Take a breath in. Now, I don't know about you, but already for me, I'm feeling a difference between my left and right side. So just kind of check in with that. Okay. Same arm. I'm going to give you a very different language. Okay. So now the hand starts bringing my arm up from my side. Arms coming up. I feel my shoulder blade kind of turning. I feel my ribs. But maybe take your other hand across. What if I told you the lungs are going to kind of lift up under that armpit and arm? Oh, you can take an arm over, and the lungs on this whole side are going to take the arm over, spine to, here. Take a breath in there. These lungs are all about breathing, right? Beautiful. There we go. Arm goes back up. Now we're going to do the funniest thing. You're going to let your arm bone go down. Keep your lungs up. Oh, drop your scapula. Oh, drop your shoulder on your lungs. Oh, let the whole thing come back down. Take a breath in, breath out. So we just used the lungs, skeleton, the arm, the scapula, the ribs. Okay. Is there a difference between the two sides of your body? Left side and right side? Let's just stay on this side. We'll try one more short thing. Often my yoga students come to me with this issue. So I start class and I look out into the room and everybody sort of has these shoulders up by your ears. So kind of just lift your shoulders up by your ears. It's really common, right? And I'm really overemphasizing it so I could drop mine a little bit. And I'll say, take a big breath in. They do, but there's not a lot of room, is there? And then I'll say this interesting thing. I'll say, take your hands. And what if I gave you this image? Could my shoulder girdle drop down onto my lungs? And if I take a breath under these two hands, can the lungs rise up to support that shoulder girdle? So these hands, it says, okay, drop shoulders onto the lungs, and then I let my arms come down. It's like my shoulder girdle sort of wraps over those upper lobes of the lungs, because the upper lobes of the lungs begin about here, under the collarbone. They go under the collarbone, and they fill the upper third of the underneath the scapula on the back. And that is a tremendous amount of internal support for the rib cage, for the shoulder and the shoulder girdle, and yes, for the arm. Don't you feel better knowing that's underneath you and you don't have to hold these up? Because if we just drop them down, those upper lobes, they say thank you. Now who's under the upper lobes? Mid lobes. So I love to just take my hands here, really, they help us find our armpit chest. So it's sort of side of my breast, armpit chest. So I could do it with both hands. You could do it with one if it doesn't fit, but I just kind of feel, oh. Now the mid lobes lay almost all in the front, and they lay against the back lobes of the lungs. So what kind of movements do mid lobes help us with? Well, they help us bring the arm up. Remember that kind of sweeping movement? You can try it with me. Yes, the arm's moving. Yes, my shoulder blade's moving. But my attention is the fact that this mid lobe is helping this arm go up. And then if I take the arm closer to my head, even higher, here's my upper lobe says, oh, I'll join in. And then upper lobe can rest on mid lobe can drop it, and arm can come back down. Very lastly, back lobes of the lungs, or they're called the bottom posterior lobes of the lungs. And they're almost all in the back of the body. So if your arms can reach around, you'll feel your rib cage back there. But our intention is to go under the ribs with our focus. So under my ribs, I kind of come here. Now, they're almost all in the back, and the mid lobe lays against them. There's a little bit of the bottom lobe in the front, tiny bit. But what I love to remind people is, why don't you just take a breath into that back hand, just a few. And those back lobes go all the way up and meet in the back, the top lobe. Really? Isn't that an amazing thought? Upper lobe wraps over and around, and it shares what I'm going to call a joint. Now, we often think of joints belonging to the skeleton, but when we discuss organs, they share joints, where organ touches organ. So upper lobe shares a joint with my back lobe. So if I could put a hand here and a hand back here, now we're doing a lot of bending, but deep breath into the back fullness of those lobes. They give us a sense of our back body, that we can sort of rest into it. not just the spine holding us up all the time. These beautiful, big, full lobes. A few more breaths, just breathing into these locations. Yeah. And then hands can come down. Oh. And there's one, you just can kind of bend into the back lobes a little bit. Unglue them. I love to use this language. Like, can we just unglue them a little bit? Sometimes they get so sticky. Just unglue them. And then you can kind of lift these up for a moment. It's just beautiful, flexion, and then neutrality and extension and sliding. The language we use for organ is sliding, gliding. Skeleton says, oh, I'll work my way over that. How's your shoulders feel? My arms feel heavier. So that's an example of how we would work in body-mind centering.
That's lovely. And, of course, my lens is the Feldenkrais lens. So I have my mind's going all different kinds of places. Like we have these whole series of lessons called welding, which is really about connecting to the inner volume of the lungs. But your languaging is so different than anything that we would use. And this idea of organs having joints, what an intriguing,
I know.
really intriguing language.
And there's movement at the joint. I mean, even that, but they have a very different movement language than my joints, the different beautiful skeletal joints, form and function, right? Organs, it's like they have some overlap, and then that's a little bit of a joint, some sort of stack. So there's a lot of sliding, gliding, compression, condensing, expanding, movement we find when we study the organs, and not study them from looking at pictures. Pictures will give me a little bit of information. Location, size, what does it do, what's its physiology. But when I get into the structure, every organ is so unique. The liver will move very differently from a lung. The heart it has us moving in such a different way from, let's say, my large intestine. So we individuate every organ, and then we start to look at their co-relationships, and we find diagonals, spirals, rotation, lateral movement, flexion, extension movements within the organs as they work as a collective whole, and how movement can actually travel along those pathways through the organ structures and then right back out through the skeleton. So we're not limited to just working within the torso. We find that the organs also manifest themselves out through our limbs.
Recently I heard in some discussion forums that I'm in with physical therapists that and I didn't read the research on this, but apparently there's research out there that shows that palpation skills don't really develop in therapists over time. I find that shocking, to be honest. And somebody said, yeah, it seems like people are either good at it, they're not good at it. But as I'm listening to you, I wonder if I would love to see some studies done of palpation skills with people from different backgrounds, and you all would be one of them, because I wonder if then the ability to connect could come from that more felt internal sense that would then be able to be extended into the other person, the connection with the other person. It's interesting to listen to the depth again of which you're making these connections, which I think many people would say is imaginary. Yeah. So what would you say to that?
Imagination is a cortical thing. Imagination is I imagine with my brain and I put that on my body. I actually tell my body what I'm imagining that it should do. And that's nowhere close to embodiment. Visualization is the same way. It's a top-down construct. And there's nothing wrong with it. I mean, in my teaching, I definitely am very clear. I'm having a visualization moment. And now I'm having an embodiment moment. And they're very, very different experiences. So the mind would love to construct our experience. You know, we would love it, but the body knows its experience. So it's trusting. It's really about trust that is an intelligence. We're talking about body and movement intelligence here, which is a real thing. And that is what grows our brain to verticality, from low to front to I can think. I mean, all that's happening through the matrix of how we're growing and developing and moving. Movement is really responsible for that. You can tell I get passionate about it.
No, it's fabulous. I'm glad that you're passionate about it. I think what you're hinting at perhaps is that at times you have to get out of the cognitive approach to something to find something else. And so if the primary way in which we're taught to explore another human being is cognitively based, it will be difficult perhaps to connect to another more felt sense and then connect with another human being on that felt sense.
That's it. Connect with another human. I mean, what if we're working with someone who's been labeled? They can't move. They've had spinal injury. They can't move. What? Really? Well, they can't sit up. They can't brush their teeth. They can't feed themselves. So is that not moving? But if I lay that person on the floor and I lay down with them, they'll be doing undulations through their gut tube, through their spinal connections. They're moving. There's their movement intelligence. It just doesn't look like what movement's supposed to look like. So I think in BMC, that came to the heart of Bonnie's work as an OT, working with brain injured children who were labeled. And she said, this labeling's not working because they're expressing through movement and intelligence in their own way. The problem is we can't hear it. And how sad and lonely that is. You know, what if I could learn, what are they telling me? And then there's a big conversation. So again, that kind of top-down cognitive telling us what it is, but then tell me what it really is here to me. What is it about that I'm trying to say with my movement? So when I realized that what I was learning was a deep, deep human intelligence, that changed everything for me. Touch and movement are the first senses to develop. They're really old. They're informing us the entire time we develop, and all the other senses of the body are building on top of that. But touching and feeling, we've needed that from just, I think it's 7 days. 7 days of conception. We're already experiencing that. And we're just a mass of cells, just a mass of cells. But we are an intelligence that's going to change and morph, and all that's going to bring us into what we are now. It's our human experience.
So a goal then of body-mind centering is to restore this somatic agency, this Well, let me ask that question, and then if the answer to that is yes, maybe you can talk a little bit more about that and even what somatic agency might mean to you all.
Okay. I'm just pausing because somatic agency for me means I have the ability to choose. Bonnie has a statement she makes a lot. And when she first said it, it was like one of those little Zen cones where, what's that mean? And you have to pause and think about it a long time. And she would say, consciousness is just choice. Okay. So somatic, we create our agency when we can feel, we increase our intelligence through the interoceptors and the exteroceptors. Because then I am not slave to my story. And my body mapping is updated regularly to what is present now as a possibility in this moment. So for me, that is what agency is. And when people have it, they learn to slow things down so they can examine them and make another choice. So I guess it's creating more options.
And so if I go back to this very touching piece that you were, examples that you were giving of lying down on the floor next to someone who maybe has been labeled as unable to, quotes, move, which I do appreciate. I'm constantly trying to redefine what is the meaning of movement, because people have such gross ideas, frankly, of that. It's a grave misjustice to us.
Mm-hmm.
But when you connect with someone at that level of what is it that, how is it that they are moving, which might be primarily that you sense into them as the movement of the breath and of the digestive system, and maybe some kind of, I don't know, quiver or motion in some of their musculature. When you tune into that, then you're really, you're tuning into it, and then you're helping them in some way through your coaching or through your hands identify maybe some untapped area of themselves or some unthought of area that's actually quite accessible, but they didn't know it. You're bringing that to consciousness.
Yes. I'm going to give you a little bit of a different image, if I may.
Absolutely.
So, because I'm a yoga teacher, I get a lot of students, and I'm always amazed by the students who end up in my classes, and they come in and they say, people tell me I can't do yoga. Something's wrong with me. My foot doesn't move, or my spine doesn't move, and I've had this surgery and that surgery, and they're my favorite students because I love proving to them they can move and that they can find their own agency and their own movement with their limitations. And often what I find is their limitations aren't limitations. They're just a starting point, and the total joy that they find that what was a frozen, I'll say a frozen foot, and I'm putting my hand up just to demonstrate, I have a frozen foot. I've been told I can't move it. But then I start working with their sense of proprioception in movement in the toes. And I have them start to stroke and touch their toes and their feet. And then I'm teaching them how the toes are moving through all the arches of the feet. And then they're learning slowly to kind of unglue that calcaneus. So they're finding the talus, the heel, and the ankle, and then they're finding rotation. And if you watch my hand, is it frozen anymore? If this was a foot, but they were labeled, I have a frozen foot. It's not going to move. Thus, I can't stand and do certain positions. So I love changing the poses, rethinking them constantly for them. They can sit, I can do all sorts of things with them. But as they find these innate movements of the spirals of the bones, that foot's not frozen. It just was locked for a long, long time, or maybe some life force starts to move through it and it starts to change. So it's like reconnecting the pathways, like getting everybody connected so there's this ease of movement. And then the joints have even consistent joint space and they get much more fluid. And we stop being afraid. We stop being afraid we're going to fall, or we don't look like we're in the pose. We're finding our pose. You know, we're finding what works for us and our bodies. So I love to remind people of that we can create our own poses for our bodies.
That's wonderful. It's very empowering. You know, it's so interesting because I've been doing these interviews on things like gyrotonics and pole dancing, and this theme of helping people start where they start, and it is been through virtually everybody we've invited, right? Because we're also inviting people who have other backgrounds as well, so they're already maybe in very depth ways interested in connecting with people where they are. They're not interested in only working with, say, high level athletes, which is nothing wrong with that. So I like how this theme of acceptance, of possibility, of agency, of choice, of all that keeps kind of running through and interplaying through many, many of the talks. And I love hearing how the language changes a bit, but a lot of the same underlying thoughts are very similar. Although I think, again, some of us are working at it at a much deeper level than perhaps others are. But still very, very important. Just putting people back in charge of their lives.
Yes, and all the different myriad ways we can do it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
You know, as we grow, as we age, as we meet life. Because here's the truth I found for myself: we change. My body's not the same it was as in my 20s or my 30s, or on and on and on, and life happens. Mm-hmm. We have many events. We have childbirth, we have death, we have, illness. I mean, we have so many things that happen to us. And can we stay relational and present in who we are in this moment with whatever's happening? We change. How present am I with that?
They surely do change. And
yeah. Thank goodness. Bonnie would say, thank goodness.
Thank goodness, that's right. Thank goodness. Thank you so much, Lisa. It's been such a pleasure to have you. I wonder if you have a little something that you could give to folks that would take them a little deeper in this journey.
You mean like a saying or another inquiry? Or?
How about something that you're giving away?
So I've made you a video taking the same principles we worked with our inquiry: lungs, heart, spine, shoulders, arm. And this time, instead of sitting, I'm going to get all of us on all fours in a table position, and that will be our starting point. And we'll do some very simple movements. We could call them yoga movements, but they're just beautiful flexion, extension, lateral movements, rotation. But we'll be using the organs as our focus to initiate from, and we'll follow that movement through to the endpoints of the body.
Lovely, lovely. So, cat-cow, something that many people are familiar with. Being on all fours, by the way, and Marlena has is one of our daily awareness through movement teachers, and she has some stuff on all fours, so it would make a really nice variation, not only to build off of your practice that you've already given us today, Lisa, but also for yoga practitioners, for people who are doing the daily awareness through movement lessons. It will give you a really different feel of something. So what you will do is you'll look below the video that you see right in front of you, and you'll see a link that you can click on that'll take you over to Lisa's giveaway, and you can sign up for that. So thank you so much for that, Lisa. I think people will enjoy it. I know I will enjoy it. And as we wrap up, what about a quote that's inspiring you these days? Something that you could share with people that might also inspire them throughout the weeks and months to come?
Well, a very favorite one always is "We are the material," which Bonnie Cohen says often, but our body-mind centering community really believes in that one. We are the material. So everything we source is here. We are it, whichever way you approach it.
So that means then also maybe that we have what we need.
I believe that.
Oh. That's nice.
You know, it's sort of, we have what we need to be in relationship with self, to grow relationship with self and other, and then the world around us. So if anatomy and embryology has taught me anything, it has taught me that we are built, it's all built on relationship, cohesive relationship. And if a relationship breaks down, the structure kind of glitches until we kind of bring it back into relationship, from center to periphery, from periphery to center, from head to tail, from front to back, from spirals to the ground and up out of the ground. There's so many ways to look at these relationships that were built to be living into as a structure.
Thank you. Thank you.
You're very welcome.
It's been a pleasure to have you here today, Lisa. You're delightful. I love the depth of what you've been exploring, and I enjoy Bonnie's work. It's like one of those works I have on the list of things I would still like to study in my life. That's one of the ones that's on my list, and who knows whether I'll get to it or not, but it's out there for me. And we want to thank you for joining us here at the Move Better, Feel Better Feldenkrais Awareness Summit. Hope you continue to keep tuning in with us on the things that are most calling to you. So just choose those sessions that call for you. Definitely do those daily movement lessons with Taro and Marilino. They're all like around 15 minutes, even sometimes a little bit shorter. So, you know, it can be an opportunity for you to really grow your felt sense in the Feldenkrais way, not in the BMC way, but oh my gosh, these things are all so compatible. Thank you, Lisa.
Thank you.